Hi, we're here with Todd Snitchler, who is running for the 50th District State Representative as a Republican. Welcome, Mr. Snitchler.
Thank you. Appreciate being here.
All right, start off, why are you running for this elected position?
For a number of reasons. The first reason would be that I'm very interested in public service and being able to represent our local community. I live here in Uniontown and am finishing my first term ever in elected office as your state representative. I've enjoyed my experience and I have introduced a number of bills and pieces of legislation that are ideas that I think would help both our community and the state as a whole, and I'd like to be returned for a second term in Columbus in an effort to continue to advocate for those ideas and be able to get them through and signed by the governor and signed into law.
What experience or abilities do you bring to this office that will help you be effective?
Well, I'm a small business owner first. I'm a private practice attorney here in Uniontown, and I represent a lot of small businesses. And I deal with issues involving the business community and issues that involve the government, whether it's workers' comp or it's dealing with regulations or various governmental agencies that affect business. And so I've got an idea about how that affects our local employers. But also, as a lawyer, I'm also involved in dealing with conflict and trying to resolve positions that perhaps don't appear to be resolvable, but that's our job, and that's a lot of the legislative process, is trying to convince folks that don't otherwise agree that we can find satisfactory middle ground.
Okay, Joe?
According to the Canton Repository, Stark County's unemployment rate has jumped in more than 25 years since December at 12.2%. For a change, the largest job losses weren't in manufacturing. The local unemployment rate hasn't been this high since March of 1984. According to these figures released Tuesday by the Ohio Bureau of Job and Family Services, the rate went up 0.7 percentage points over November. Canton's rate went up to 13.5% from 12.8%, and in November, and Massillon went up from 12.9% from 12.2%. Based on these statistics, what are you going to do about employment in Ohio?
I think unemployment is perhaps the biggest issue that's facing the state, and whether you want to look at it from the unemployment side or saying it's how do we create jobs and how do we encourage industry in the state of Ohio, that's our obligation. I often hear colleagues say it's my duty to create jobs as a legislator, and I disagree with that, and I say we don't create jobs. Private sector creates jobs, individual entrepreneurs and folks that have a business idea, they create the jobs. It's my obligation as state representative to put policies in place that allow entrepreneurs to have the opportunities to succeed, to ensure that there's capital that they can find, whether it's from venture capital or local banks or the Small Business Administration, to be able to finance those ideas and then to help them grow that business, hire folks that live here in Stark County and elsewhere in an effort to put people back to work. So it's my obligation to try and create the guardrails, have an appropriate amount of regulation, but not too much regulation, to have a long-term stable tax climate so that businesses that are looking for a place to locate know that if they come to Ohio, there's stability in the tax structure, they know how to price their product, they know they have qualified employees that can do the work that they need, and then to make sure that those criteria all exist. And then, frankly, it's up to the governor and to the Department of Development and others to sell our state and to tell the story that we have, because Ohio has a lot to offer. And sometimes I think we have an inferiority complex, and we really need to talk about the great things that we have to offer, and particularly here in Stark County.
All right. What do you plan to do about the industry and job losses in Stark County?
There's a number of things that need to be addressed. I've introduced a couple of different bills already and will reintroduce them if I'm fortunate enough to be returned to the General Assembly in January that deal with job training. House Bill 360 says, you know what, not every kid's going to go to college, and that's okay. Those that do, there was a similar bill introduced that would afford them a tax credit for up to 5 years. Well, House Bill 360 says if you want to participate in a journeyman training program where you're acquiring job skills in the trades, that you could be entitled to the same 5-year tax credit. Because I think we have to remember that there's college students and there's kids that are not going to go to college. They don't want to do that. It's not a good fit for them. So let's reward their contributions to our society as well. Further, I introduced a separate bill, 277, that would give employers a $100 a month tax credit if they hired unemployed Ohioans, put them back to work. Now, we need to understand that that bill alone is not going to solve our unemployment problem. But if we've got employers that are thinking, do we hire, do we not hire, this is one of the tools that hopefully will push them over the line and they say, you know what, we are ready, we'll bring somebody on. And we ran the numbers and figured out that even giving that credit for up to 2 years at $2,400 will be the maximum credit per employee. the amount of sales tax and other taxes that are paid by that employee even up, and the state doesn't end up losing money. In fact, we end up in the positive because those folks then are paying their mortgage, they're able to keep their house, they're not in foreclosure, and they're able to, take care of their family, which ought to be what we're aspiring towards.
How would less regulation on businesses help the economic climate?
I often hear, both from my clients in my private practice and in my role as a state legislator, that there is too much government interference. Now, there is an appropriate place for government regulation to ensure that things are being done safely, that the public is protected, and that companies aren't running amok. But there's also where you get out of balance, and there's regulation for the sake of regulation. I have had businesses approach me and say, we're dealing with issues involving the EPA, or dealing with issues involving workers' compensation, or any number of other governmental agencies, and they're making it incredibly expensive for us to do business here. They're making it punitive, meaning that we've had a problem, maybe it was a minor infraction, and we're being fined tens and hundreds of times the amount of the infraction, making it harder for them to do business, particularly at a time when the economy has been very slow. And Ohio has been behind the national economic recovery for the last 20 years. We're always the first in, and we're one of the last states to come out. And if we could right-size our regulations so that it's an appropriate amount of regulation and not burdensome on businesses and families, then we would be in a position to recover better and then move ahead of the national average, which is something we haven't been able to do for almost 20 years now.
What are you going to do to ensure that opportunities exist for families and children to succeed and thrive?
I think, as we've already talked about, making sure that the appropriate amount of regulation exists, that the state is attractive for businesses, but we also need to make sure that we're working in education and making sure that students who go to high school, want to go to college, want to get trained in the trades or in some other area, have the ability to do that and can do so in a cost-effective way. And we've done a pretty good job of maintaining the costs of college over the last 4 or 5 years. I've only been in the legislature, as I said, for the last 2 years, but even prior to that, caps were put on the amount of increases for tuition and programs that have been put in place by Chancellor Fingerhut in an effort to move seniors to sophomores and for you to have the ability to take college coursework while you're still in high school and reduce your overall expenses to get a 4-year degree. And the fact that we have great colleges and universities right here in Stark County are all things that we need to do to make sure our workforce is prepared for jobs in the 21st century and not just jobs that are perhaps from the 19th or 20th century and jobs that probably are not done like they were done then, or they don't even exist anymore.
All right. What's going to happen to retirement funds and such in the future?
Ohio has got a pension problem with regard to state pensions, which I assume is the point of your question. There are 5 different pension systems, all of which are being evaluated now by the Ohio Retirement Study Council. It is evaluating and figuring out where things are with regard to balances, recommended changes to the various systems in order to make sure that they protect the people who are already participating in the system, particularly those folks who have already retired, as well as what changes need to be implemented to ensure that the system can function going forward and will remain solvent, meaning there's money available to pay the current teachers, policemen, firefighters, state employees, and others as they move into retirement. And recommendations are going to be made, and we're at the legislative level going to have to make decisions about how we'll deal with the questions that come up with that. And we expect to do that, if not in the lame duck session, right after the first of the year.
According to the Dayton Daily News, the Tax Foundation ranks Ohio's total tax burden 7th highest, and that's according to its 2008 study, which is the most recent. Among our 50 states, 7th qualifies in our book as one of the highest. Knowing that, how do you plan on lowering taxes for businesses?
I think we have already started to do that. Prior to my joining the General Assembly in 2005, we passed an overall tax reform which phased out the corporate income or corporate franchise tax, introduced the commercial activity tax, also known as the CAT tax, which is a lower tax at a broader base, which was good for our manufacturers and folks that have a lot of inventory, as well as reducing the income tax over 5 years, which the last year of that was suspended in the last General Assembly, but is scheduled to be enacted and put forth in the next General Assembly. We'll see if that happens depending on the state of the budget. But we have to look at ways for us to make sure that that is fully implemented, have a chance to evaluate it fully. The recession started right after, well, no one saw it coming necessarily, but it started right after those changes were made. And it's been phased in, and I don't know that it's had a fair opportunity to actually be seen as how it would function in a time of economic growth. But we're going to have to take a look at that in order to determine what's an appropriate amount, because the state does need revenue in order to operate, and we're all very much aware of that. But you also have to make sure that it's an attractive place for companies to locate and want to do business. And striking that right balance is what we're charged to do with as legislators.
Today we've been here with Todd Snitchler, who's running for the 50th District State Representative as a Republican. Thank you for your time, Todd.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
This is Joe Millard and Caitlin Doherty here, and you are watching Lake Television.